Hello, my name is Chad Bishop. I live at 7405 South Valencia Drive in Sioux Falls. I have 3 children in the Sioux Falls School District. This message is intended for the board members of the Sioux Falls School District. I had made a presentation on July 26th, or a short statement. I ran over time, and you all were very gracious in offering me the ability to send the data, and I'm going to provide it here with a bit of context. So in my presentation, I gave a little bit of the history, and I would like to just cover that here. I'll be brief. So the beginning of the school year 2018, I'd begun to notice a few things. I reached out to Mr. Thulke, and he was gracious and arranged a meeting with the nutritional staff. Things that got my attention were what was being served in the district at lunch. So I began to take some pictures. Now I reserve the right to be wrong here. The information I'm presenting, if it wasn't on the label, I did try to go find an analog for it, and I got it from the Nutrislice website that Brandon Valley makes use of, which I like a lot. So the other thing that got my attention was on January 9th, the Argus ran this story. And so I'll put links to these items in the notes and in the document that I provided previously. So if you read this article, one thing you'd come away, one view you would come away with is that the district is doing everything they can, and it's out of their hands. And so I would frame this differently, and I would call attention to what I did originally when I mentioned that at the candidates forum prior to the last election, every candidate gave the same answer when they were asked about school nutrition, public health, and the impact with respect to COVID adverse outcomes. And they all deferred to the regulatory bodies, saying the meals meet the regulatory requirements and we would defer to them. And so I'm here to draw attention to the fact that there's a gaping hole in the regulatory requirements with respect to added sugar. So I will put a link in the notes to the guidelines for, wrong one, sorry. And I'll start with what some potential guidelines could be, given that the USDA does not provide them. The American Heart Association recommends children 2 to 18 have less than 25 grams of added sugar a day. The American Academy of Pediatrics, they have the same recommendation. The World Health Organization does it a little differently. They recommend no more than 10% of caloric intake be added sugar. They use the term free sugars, and they do differentiate between milk sugars and intrinsic sugars. You could think of intrinsic sugars as sugars still bound up in fruit, the actual fruit, not juice. And so, and then their scale moves depending upon age, sex, and activity level of the child. So this was an issue before the pandemic, and now I think it's a bigger issue. It should be obvious, other than age, obesity and diabetes, then I think renal disease and hypertension. Those are the 4 biggest risk factors for comorbidities, for adverse outcomes from COVID. And so I will argue, hopefully convincingly at some point, not now, that a lot of that's within our control, and that the district can do, there's an opportunity for improvement in how we contribute to the public health. So with that, here's my ask. Initially, I was asking for all nutritional information to be available on the web. I would like the district to define a sugar budget. I would like the menu and the nutritional information to be integrated. And what I mean by that is, here's the menu that is currently published. Here's the nutritional information. People aren't going to do what I did and go and put them together. And so I am asking that we take steps in that direction. And I am also asking that once we've done that, it should be trivial to add a badge to every meal. Red, yellow, green. Do they meet the sugar budget requirements? I'm asking that we publish a report that the school board will review on a quarterly basis on the number of meals that met the American Academy of Pediatrics requirement, or American Heart Association also. I have a stretch goal, and I brought this up with the PTO at Jane Addams prior. Jane Addams is very close to the nutritional center. What I learned from the nutritional staff is that the biggest cost is labor, by far. So the proximity to the nutritional center of Jane Addams and the fact that labor at Jane Addams might not be an issue. All City, the commitment time that we parents there provide, there are 2 to 3 parents in the classroom all day. My proposal to the PTO, and it was very well received, was to reintroduce a kitchen there. A Whole Foods kitchen. We would consider it a pilot, and we'll see the details we can talk about later. But I'm willing to coordinate that. And I would like potentially to publish a retrospective. Now that we have the data, I would like to, the nutritional data, go back and do all the menus for the last several years and see how they've changed over time. That was the ask. Here's my offer. I'm build relatively complex things. I am here to help. I will offer my technical skills in software and systems. I will recruit others to help. I'll also take whatever we do. We'll publish it under open source licenses, and we'll make it available to any other district in the state or the nation if it's useful. Typically, those things don't get adopted unless they're useful. The history of this, you've not heard of what I'm doing because I've been respectful. I tried to work within the system. Jane Hanneman at Jane Addams was very supportive. Todd was very supportive, and the nutritional staff was very friendly. And we did get one of the items done. And I think from what I heard, we're on the path to potentially get the second. But I'm willing to, I now feel like this is important enough with the pandemic and the impact of public health on our collective public health and on our collective economic risk. It's a function of public health. And so if we were not one of the most obese and diabetic countries in the world, I think a lot more lives would have been saved. I don't know that anybody disagrees with that. So I'm now going to publicly advocate respectfully and constructively and collaboratively to improving this. I'm going to advocate for public funding. So wherever the shortfalls are, we'll figure out some way to do it, whether that's through corporate money, taxes, charity. We're going to figure out a way to do this. And then again, I'll run the pilot at Jane Addams as long as you would like to do it, even though my child graduates from there this year. So how bad is this in our district? So if 25 grams of added sugar is their daily recommendation, here is one meal. And this isn't all of it. Just the juice, there's 22 grams. And people who would say, whoa, that's fruit sugar. Biochemically, your body doesn't see it any differently than a Coke. And so fruit sugars, and the World Health Organization would define it such as intrinsic sugar, are typically still bound in the fruit. And it's the fiber that they're bound with that slows the rate of absorption through the digestive tract and therefore lowers the glycemic load. And it's not quite as detrimental. That rate of absorption being slowed is a significant thing. But when we strip it out and it's just juice, biochemically, it's nearly identical to a soda or to an energy drink. The chocolate milk, so there's 12 grams in a skim milk. There's 18 in the chocolate milk, so there's 6 of added sugar there. So right there, those two items, without the addition of this, 43 grams of corn syrup, we're already over the budget. So here is my initial breakdown, and I'll call your attention to the sugar column. Again, if I made a mistake, it's unintentional. And I will point out these are not divided into the intrinsic sugars, the milk sugars, and the free sugars. This is the total. So 87 grams of sugar, and I think I break that down later, so we'll move on. Here is an example of how the World Health Organization identifies the limits by biological sex, by age, and by their activity level. And so it's a moving scale. And their definition, no more than 10% of total energy intake. Again, 25 grams of added sugar by the American Heart Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics. So here is that single meal analysis, and I did break it up by what, as best I could, by intrinsic sugars, sugars from milk, and free sugars. And so we exceed the 25 grams. We are providing 14% of the recommendation in a single meal to an elementary age child. And the data that I picked out before, it is, I think it was 7. I highlighted because that's the data I used for my first grader. And so the calculation that you see there with the World Health, that's 12% of their sugar budget. So, but I'm going to advocate for the more stringent requirement because I think we have such a long way to go. And so in this meal, they have no more sugar budget left for their breakfast, no more sugar budget left for their dinner or for snacks when they get home. The district has consumed all of the sugar budget with this meal. So here's a very similar meal. It was on the menu. It was the mini waffles meal. There's some pictures that I'd shown. And again, the raw data and then broken down intrinsic sugars, sugars from milk, and free sugars, which is also the added sugar. And that particular meal is 240% of the recommendation. So the nutritional staff complained that I was being unfair and cherry picking my data. So I just took one randomly that happened to be inadvertently documented by the Argus. And in that case, it was this. And all I did was identify the items in the pictures and I put them in the spreadsheet. And so they randomly selected it, not me. Oops, that's not loading. And in that particular meal, the bad actor is the highly processed banana bread. And so if we look at that breakfast that's being served, so that was not breakfast for lunch, that was breakfast. We have the breakfast exceeded the American Heart Association and the American Academy of Pediatrics daily recommendation by 100, didn't exceed it. It provided 148% of their recommendation. So again, they have no room for error at lunch, no room for error in snacks and dinner. There's no additional sugar budget. The district has consumed it all. So here is, this is an edge case since it's one of the breakfast for lunch meals and the actual breakfast meal. But in adding them, I can make the case that the 2 meals served in the district are providing 362% of the daily added sugar recommendation. And the thing I wanted this slide is meant to point out is for those who are truly concerned about equity in the district, when we realize that the majority of the kids eating the breakfast at the Title I schools and the free lunches, this is going to impact them disproportionately. So the worse the composition of the meal with respect to added sugar, the more it's going to impact them because they don't have as many choices. I can tell you personally from being in, 8 different schools in the district as a mentor, as a coach, and as a parent, that the children and the parents in the district who are aware of the quality of the food with respect to sugar and other components, they have a choice. If they have the means and they have the knowledge, they have a choice, and their kids pack their lunch every day. So it's the folks who don't have a choice that are going to be disproportionately impacted by this. That is a concern of yours, and I believe it should be. Let's do better. Vending. The whole middle layer there, those items, every one of them exceeds the daily limit. And this is going to be a wake-up call for those who really like juice, but the reality is your body doesn't differentiate chemically between the high fructose corn syrup in a Coke and this. High fructose corn syrup is a 60-40 split of fructose and glucose, while regular sucrose is 50-50. but it's still all processed. The fructose is metabolized in the liver, same pathways as alcohol, and that's why you have so many children presenting non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The vending breakdown on this, just the grape juice is 180% of the daily recommendation. Again, the nutritional staff, I wanted to appear somewhat, I was just taking a random sampling. This was the week that article hit on January 9th. And so the composition, if you can't read it, the sugar column for the day is 36 grams, 32 grams, 80 grams, 54 grams. The limit is 25 grams for the day. These are single meals. The Argus story, again, I'm referring to the story talking about the district doing everything that it can and still losing. If there are 3,500 calories in a pound of fat, and we start talking about the amount of sugar in excess of what the recommendation is served by the district, how long, and assuming the kids eat perfectly, the other meals at home and all of their snacks are perfect, how long will that excess, how long will it take for that to add up to a pound of fat, contributing to clinical obesity? And if it's this amount of sugar, contributing to a pre-diabetic state, hyperglycemia, and its preceding state, hyperinsulinemia. Again, I have no medical training, so take all of this with a basketball-sized grain of salt, but I believe it's accurate. If it's not, I reserve the right to be wrong and change my mind when better information is presented. So the column on the right is the one to pay attention to. That is a quantification of the potential damage being done by the food served in the district. I would recommend The Skinny on Obesity. It was published by the University of California system. One of the primary contributors is this gentleman named Dr. Robert Lustig. I have reached out to him. I have made arrangements. He is willing to either travel to Sioux Falls or he is willing to conduct a remote seminar. His specialty is pediatric endocrinology. And so his statement here, while it might seem hyperbolic that sugar is a chronic dose-dependent hepatotoxin, it can be quantified. The amount in which we're consuming now these days is serving as a poison, dose-dependent, depending on how much you consume, to the liver. That's why I mentioned the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And so we'll take all of this in balance, but I would offer, in order to move the ball down the field here, if it would be useful to the board, I will bring in Dr. Lustig, either remotely or personally, and we can have a discussion about this. So I mentioned this in the meeting, in my statement. I understand, after speaking to the nutritional staff, that USDA compliance is required for about 4.5 to 5 million to come back into the budget. And so I understand that. And I perceive that you're caught between a policy rock and a budget hard place. But I also want to point out that you can meet the USDA regulatory requirements and miss the mark with respect to the added sugar requirements, the AHA and the AAP layout. Again, what I'm asking for, we've already done. The nutritional information is on the web. I would like to work to define a sugar budget with the board. I would like for the menus and the nutritional information to be integrated. I am asking that we badge those menu items. And once we've done the first 2 and 3, that will be simple. I would like for a quarterly report for compliance with the sugar recommendations to be evaluated by the board, to be made available to the board and be evaluated. And again, once 2 and 3 are done, that is a trivial amount of effort, and I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to lead the whole pilot, Whole Foods pilot at Jane Addams. Not Whole Foods the company, but just reintroducing a kitchen. I will organize the staff. If I can get volunteers from the community, from the Jane Addams community, we will serve both the El City Elementary school student body and the Elementary Immersion Center student body. And then I would like to work to publish, once we have all 2 and 3 done, and the historical data, I'd like to publish a retrospective of what it has looked like the last decade. And so we can have a benchmark of how we can improve. And I do want to underscore this, for all published data, it needs to be both human and computer consumable, so we can, essentially trust but verify, or build a model that others can follow as to how they make it easier for others to access the data. There's nothing proprietary, nothing private about this data. And so let's make it available, easy to be used, and leveraged by the people whom the school board serves. Again, I'm here to help. I have some skills. I will volunteer, and I'll find others to volunteer, or I'll raise the money. I'm going to now actively advocate in the community to change this and to raise awareness. I don't think this is a political issue other than funding. I think everybody agrees something should be done. And then I'll lead the Whole Foods pilot if that's appropriate. Thank you for your time. I realize it's been 21 minutes. The 3 other times I did this, it ran over 35, so I'm going with the 21. Thank you for your patience. I share your goals to build the best school district in the nation. I believe this is important in doing so. Have a good day.